Ekathela ka ntlheng ya Zimbabwe wena Western Shona or bali Eastern Shona re ba tšea lore ke ntho e tshee because Western Shona ke bona oldest group kore re vakalaka ba tshelela ka kwa ka Zimbabwe ba re karanga because of what Shona people they don't have L instead of L they put R that's why they ke karanga yona ke e kalanga people so hona le batho ba lore re ba bitsa ke batho ba tshaminuka ke batho re ba bitsa lore ke ba dimbanyika ke ba venda ene hanji lina la dimbanyika ba sa itse le tlhabo kae ilina le tswane ho Tanganyika wa ba le motho wa dimbanyika e acrossa na ya ka kwa ka Phando first kingdom chief of the Venda people athumele group of Venda or ba under his leadership ke Phando. So right now ure ba le ba itwa ka kwa ka ntlheng ya Zimbabwe ba fitla mo Mapungubwe ba ya phela le o ba fitile mo ba fitile mo bontsi ba bona ke ba bona ke ba lemba ke ba bona sa kula ba bitsa no ke ba mojaji ba ka pasa ba ndezi
to pay tribute. Normally, Ulova more give to Vaida, Valova, because he had enough for the Lebanese group. Patria Munumuja was you, Wolo, Yoga, Central Africa, Munumuja. Wamatomo yowe atomino wusio iwe ni mwana wa Munumuja awa yani odwa mola gamra waure wusio la utube ubeliba rabale le mambo yoeluru uga madila mu south renda kamo Limpopo yani na mambo yogena wa machomo wa thola vosi werna ya baluveli yani marawamo we wa vale le lore mwana wawe we ibe ule wa maninyana abale le ayima khosi unyanya ka utseba ore mwana yo uyimisitswe ke mama gale mawe amchavisa amchavisa adziva uri vaga utula uri uyimisitswe ke mama badlomu kulaya vosi vela kaguwa munhu mutapa buke kudrumile levyona kaonesabule kaonesabule ayathoma munhu bakwale yona mukeguli la adziva uri no rino tsepelana yeni risadze uri yakaye ke moka ka baka la gore o be a tseba dilo tše ba di šomisa o dira pula ke mokana a ba di tšea a di tšea ke sepela le jona e toba sebetša sa ka gore more ya ona re ka ba le bothata bja komelelo re kgone go nesa pula re phele.
All nations or all populations or communities will always leave traces of their existence. So with Mapungubwe, now it's what we'd call an archaeological site, and it becomes an archaeological site because there's evidence of something or an activity. So there's evidence of trade, there's evidence of mining, there's evidence of manufacturing, there's evidence of globalization.
kadzumiri sei yahelela akambhedhe kanenge tsvarwa kune kamutsva kunali kambhedhe kunali kambhedhe ipapo amina iyo nduna yako yamugaro imanda
mina vatswari va munhu va huma nchangana ka mabuta ankani amzambiki bevalandzwa hi valandza ku nyelesa egoyini govela vireke va kukuza va tala va nghena ka mijaja leyi hina hi nga tswariwa kona va ehla va vuya ni manana va tshunela va ku va tlhelela kona nchangana hi za hi ta vona ndhawu leyi vatswari va hina
a hi hambanani a fani ku va ku xiyimo xa ka hina hi valutshwa hi vakhalanga hi va ka mitombolo vanhu va ka ncila valungu hi khandziya nsinya hi rhavi hi chika hi nsinya loko u khandziya hi nsinya hi ta chika hi rhavi loko rima yi nga biyelanga ta ku dyela swilo swa wena hinkwaswo hi ta tshovela laha hi ka hi nga ri ha tshovela loko ka hi nga rimangi hina hi vakhalanga hina.
When you're migrating, are we using modern ways of understanding migration? Emigrating, immigrating, citizenship. I don't belong here and I'm going into another space because it belongs to another. And then there's this idea that who they call the Khoisan, we're also moving about. But also you find that there's like, it was not people who were just moving about, you know, aimlessly. It had to do with cycles of nature and seasons and so on. But what I know for a fact is that there was never this idea of an empty land. This place was always occupied. So I think maybe we need to stop politicizing the idea of migration.
Relationship vale na rena babilwa isiba bakwena ba matshete le ba lotsi infecting for really infecting ba matshete le bakwena kwa malome la ragadi ke cousins then eri ta go ba lotsi le tja ba lore mosadi le mitso re ingaka ya Mapungubwe re le Mangube uba anyetswe ke molotsi ke gereshi ene ka tsela ka kwa Zimbabwe bontsi ba bona ba itwa re ke ba moyo mara antsi bona no bontsi ba bona re ba khwana ka morero ke Western Province of Zambia go ka tima mollo go ka tima mollo ya why ba ka tima mollo ge ke botšiša mokgalabe o mongwe bana ba mitsa re ke sebadi kwa mokwena ke why le ka ditwa re lefelo le ke ka tima mollo ene lona le Zambia karo Zambia ke gole mokgalabe wa re sebadi o ba ana le re ke molalo ke sebara sa hae bana ba mitsa shaka mara shaka yo ebe e motho wa Mosotho ke why le ka mitsa re ke shaka are the very same time Mazulu ba muzilikazi kamashobano ka mangete ka langa ulanga kazaza lizitha ge ba itswa kwa Zululand ba ya kwa through assistant ya Robert Moffat le Silasi ba bile ba lore ba tsamaya ba ilwa le Batswana le Babilwa ba ya North then he ba fitha le filong lo ba rene ke katima mollo wa ba le ntwa e ba lore a ina bogoni ge muzilikazi a tshurwa ke batho bale ke ge ba lotse ba re timile mollo bari ke ka tima mollo ba timile mollo o tswa go matebele ba mozilikazi
kabe mama arena nare mkhalabe ramalepa mujore when we are from Zimbabwe my mother would cry papa skanzama kwere in but my grandfather would say hey that's where we come from that's our people there because uyambulala ngokuthi ubuye eZimbabwe mara ukhumalo lo muntu na ukhumalo usuchithe igazi ekhaya.
We ultimately come down to this idea of when brothers fight to their death, a stranger inherits their property. You understand? And then that tells us who convinced the Hutus that they're different from the Tutsis. As they made it up, they're literally measuring your nose, all right, you're Tutsi. They measure your nose, all right, you're Hutu. It's like, what in the world is this? And then they can do the same thing that Ghanaians don't like Nigerians, Nigerians don't like Ghanaians. It's like, what in the world is this? Who benefits from the thing is usually the one who originates the thing, and who originates the thing is usually the one who benefits from the thing.
So abantwana bayahlupheka namhlanje kuneyinhlupheko kunezinto ezindida abadala singakhumbuli ngoba sibusy focusing on my divisions, my culture, my tradition, my tribe, my people, our people. The mission we have to embark upon is how we are going to become a strong African nation, bringing Africans all over the world, not just in the continent, to work together and plan for our development together. And to do that, you need a high level of confidence and independence of mind, very high level one.
What I find encouraging young people is that they're finding alternative platforms to do that pan-Africanist work without the officials or the official dom or the governance systems.
Whether we like it or not, blood is always connected, and blood, like a river, is always a flowing river, that even from north to south, a river will find a way to reach and to go where it's supposed to go freely. And I feel like our blood is like that as African people.
Pay attention to your totems, pay attention to your clan praises, because they say a lot about where you come from, like what you think you are. You are African before Mukos. You are African before Mupedi. You are African before you are all of those things. Because it means we cannot come together and create a force of spiritual power that can awaken the powers of our people who once were kings and queens that ruled, that also missed the mark. We are repeating the same pathologies and mistakes that our ancestors have repeated. We'll never get our land and wealth back.
Initially it was called nhlanhlanhlaporsa, an eye of God.
Mapungubwe really is important for future generations, because we learn trade out of Mapungubwe, the gold and so forth. We owe everything to our ancestors. The gold coverings that you see in Ghana, right? Those are not written, fair enough, they're not text as written, but it's a language that they put into sculpting to preserve so that their generation can be able to know where they come from.
Clolela obviously was a student at the University of Pretoria. Yes. And she did excavations at Mapungubwe site.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Looking at the scepter, I'm wondering about the craftsmanship of how this was forged, and perhaps we can learn from the West African tradition. But also, I mean, I'm looking at these bangles, and to me, they resemble what we have now in Limpopo. Not gold, but it's very close to what is happening around there in terms of the craft that you have among the Tsonga and Venda people as well.
Now, if you look at the wooden pieces and the wooden structures which were then covered in gold, that craftsmanship is still there. The only thing that's missing is the gold.
Yes, yeah. But everything else is still there. Yes, now you can see that.
Trade route which this material represented, remembering that the colonial boundaries are colonial boundaries, but the civilization went way beyond all of those boundaries. And as you know, Mapungubwe is at the confluence of Botswana, Zimbabwe and South Africa, where the Shashi River meets the Limpopo. And that route was through Sofala and into the east. And those threads went across the continent as well, where the trade activity gave rise to the civilizations which developed.
Once as we're upstairs,
I was down here and something really caught my eye. And it is that bird right there, the Sankofa bird.
I mean, that object over there is gold leaf. It's wooden underneath. It's very much like the Mapungubwe pieces upstairs in that regard. They're not only objects which are, have wonderful design, but the design is linked directly to the cosmology of the people themselves.
Because I saw over there, Torela was showing me the Timbuktu gold. You know, the whole thing of Mansa Musa traveling from Mali go to Mecca. He was giving gold en route. And what did that do to the value of gold?
Well, there you go. Well, you know, there is if you took the value of what Mansa Musa took up to Mecca, and you had to translate that into contemporary costings, it is astronomical how much gold was taken.
He does, Bill Gates. Oh my goodness, I feel really robbed. I'll tell you the truth. No, I feel really robbed because this is knowledge that could have been passed on and through families and through generations, and I feel really robbed by what colonialism did. Tell us about the Sankofa bit.
That saying, it's one of our Akan sayings, which means you have to go back and pick up to help you, pick up the ideas, everything, the spirit, to help you to run forward. And that's why I said all great men and women, they've always looked back to understand where it all came from and to give you that confidence in who you are. The African was never meant to be demoralized, undignified, never.
What fascinated me and drew me to Mapungubwe was the whole essence of trade, right? Because history, or the kind of colonial history that most of us are exposed to or were exposed to growing up, was the fact that trade, business knowledge came with the Europeans. As if Africans, we never had that essence of trading.
Another fellow student at the University of Pretoria, Morungwa Mutswana by birth, also argues that there is evidence of such trade activities in present-day Botswana.
Tozo is one of the three major sites that form what we call the Dozwe polity. The Dozwe polity would mean something like the Dozwe chiefdom or the Dozwe kingdom. The three main centers being Tozo Mohala, where we are. We have another site called Busuzwe, there's another site called Shushu. So these were the three capitals of this kingdom. Dozwe as a chiefdom is at the moment the earliest known complex society in Southern Africa. Okay, and at the time of its occupation came Mapungubwe to the Leopardskopini kingdom. And for some time, the two chiefdoms or kingdoms existed along each other.
But why did that civilization emerge? That's what we need to understand. One is trade with the East Coast. Sofala, Kwelimani, and others. There were people there. Initially, it was the Arabs, the Moors, before the arrival of the Portuguese. So they were getting gold. And the gold was in the interior of Southern Africa.
Before the Dozwe excavation, the thinking, the thought at the time was that K2 Mapungubwe and probably Great Zimbabwe were the only gold accessing or gold producing chiefdoms. But traces of gold have been found here in Dozwe in some of the sites. Very little, but enough to convince the scientists or the archaeologists that gold access, the distribution of gold within Southern Africa was a much broader and more widespread than it was initially thought.
Gold is a main Mapungubwe, and a main gold. Gold was just coming from eastern part of Botswana, southwest of Zimbabwe. We are not far from the Gwanda gold mine in Mapungubwe, southern Zimbabwe, and the Tuli River from Matopo Hills flows not far from the gold mine. Alluvial gold was just coming from the north with the river, and they were penning it from the rivers. So there was no gold around this place, and there is no gold even by now. Ere ka lebella gold ela o ya ka ba holwane ba mo ba itlhalosa ke ntwe ba le loreng ba re dilo to smelt that gold ka basarwa le ba re bolela ka bushmen, because we have lots of paintings on rocks from the bushmen.
It wasn't just gold that was coming from here, ostrich feathers, skins, leopard skins, and other animals which have got beautiful skins. That's what was going to the coast. Then what were those Africans getting? They were getting beads.
Beads, glass beads from the Indian Ocean. They come all the way from the Swahili coast via K2 Mapungubwe, going inland through Tozomahala. We have a lot of beads. I'm sure if you go up, we might find some fragments even just on the surface. The same ones that you are finding at K2 Mapungubwe. And they go all the way towards the desert.
That's the way I came away, giving a guy Mahalabe. Mabusha. The glass beads jela, Vachama Mapungubwe, Vahone Ota Urichia Jela Echerinyani, Vadi Ris Melcha, Vadi glass beads jelly hulu, Chivatohona Vadi decorate. Yeah.
Calico, Amadeo, this is what they were getting. If you look at the picture of Neanda, they will get a huge piece tied around here, just a hand like that. This snuff wasn't there. The plant was introduced by the Portuguese from South America, just like maize was introduced by the same Portuguese from South America. Even musical instruments, it had musical instruments, the mbira, it would be paid. It was brought in and then became part of the spirit world.
Salt distribution, production and distribution is extremely difficult to study, primarily because salt is not preservable. But when you find ceramics that have perforations that we know from ethnographic records that those ceramics were used for seeking salt from its source, then we know for sure that the people were producing salt. So we believe from evidence that salt was exploited from Makhadi area, traveling down through areas like Bogusuzi. It was going in different directions, going to Ngamiland and also going to the south. And what's happening? Lava Karagaya Sunzumbarva, what's going my Yasus, Millennium, Makanzam, Nemasim, Watira, which are Martins Pusamusi, was a Kotakuti, Amatsola, Senator May. Ufunango, Simen, it can't have a second, send up or Sake good. The Dozo people, their wealth was almost entirely based on cattle production. They would have had places that they used as cattle posts, and then they would have had other places that were good for crop production and not so good for pastures. So we believe that the Dozo people were producing cattle for exportation, and then the Mapungubwe people were eating the cattle and then exporting other items.
I'm always struck by the way we think of this tradition of trade is something that is trapped in history and ended when those civilizations declined. Upon reflection, I realized that that tradition never ended. It continues into the present.
This is the government door from Mali. In the olden days, these are the doors. In the olden days, the room is very small. So these are the doors. This is family food. Vida from Nigeria, Burkina Faso, the crocodile. Burkina.
Beyond the natural resources and other material culture, Africans have been exporting even the intangible forms of our cultures. An example of this is how we export music, how we export our ways of being, and even how we export our belief systems. So in a way, our culture, our intangible culture, becomes a major export by the continent.
If we want to talk about globalization, we need to look at the very first human beings to go out and populate the rest of the world. When you find those in Luchirita, what they now erroneously call Tasmania, you have the blackest black people you can imagine. You actually have to deal with the reality as black people were on ships that were able to reach across the entire Pacific Ocean in order to get there. If you look at places like Mapungubwe, what they call Bougainville, you find some of the blackest people on the face of the entire planet Earth. If you go to places like West Papua New Guinea, all of these are testaments of the actual globalization, which is black people going out and settling across the entire planet Earth.
We see that there is a roving civilization which a lot of people cannot actually point to say what type of a civilization was this, which moved out of Africa, went into Mesopotamia. Could it be a civilization which now they term the Sumerian civilization, which was actually a civilization from Kemet, which had these kings, which were roving all over the world and coming, and one such person we come across in the cuneiforms is Dumuzi, but he was of paramount importance because the place that he chose to be buried was next to Inzaloelanga. This is where the fascination point comes into effect, because he said, when I die, I want to be buried next to my father's favorite what? Place.
Which archives are there to take us back to 2,500 years back, when the first recorded history of maritime in the east of African.
Well, look, you know, if you go back into antiquity, into ancient times, 2,000-3,000 years BC, there was an awareness of the east coast of Africa. There was trading taking place. There were people living in India. There were people living in what's today Oman, or the Arabian continent. There were people living in East Africa. And they all interrelated with each other.
You see, you could say, they're not in South Africa. It was that during that time when they were trading. And they had to buy this from the Arabs.
From the Arabs?
Yeah, they buy these things in Arabs.
Oh, so the blue ones are the important?
Those are the important ones. Image. Peace.
evidence suggests that Mapungubwe became a center for trading with a trade network linked to around areas and extending as far as China. This international trade was mainly in gold and ivory. Additionally, the Chinese also wanted leopard skins. In return, Chinese celluloid, a green glazed stoneware, made its way to Mapungubwe. At the beginning of the globalization, Mapungubwe was part of those states that were in the forefront.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you and welcome to the Spice Emporium.
This is lovely. I love the...
This is very iconic, you know.
It's very iconic, yeah.
Very iconic. The company itself is over 100 years this year.
Really?
Exactly 100 years.
Family
Yeah, family company. We've been established in this trade for many, many years.
Okay.
And we've been bringing spices to the whole country here.
From where?
From basically 90% from India. Now, one also wants to know how come Zanzibar has got cloves, Madagascar has got cloves, the Comoros have got cloves, and India has got cloves.
Right.
So, you know, somewhere along the line, somebody came and planted something.
Somebody came and
planted, that's it, yeah. That's it. I think they were looking for gold.
They were looking for gold.
They were looking for gold, and they said, let's put some gold here and let's give you some cloves, you know. They must have got involved with traditional healing also.
Sure.
Because India and Chinese are very strong into traditional healing.
Please tell me about that.
I think
spices come into...
Yeah, I'll show you some of the powders that we have also.
For traditional healing?
Yes. And then you'll see parallel also that we are finding a lot of African customers coming for this. They come to buy, they come for the same thing and they say, this is what I want, this is what my grandfather used to use, you know? for healing of certain things, yeah.
Is it?
So we have these powders also, come, I'll show you.
Yeah, it's nicely packaged.
Yeah. Now this is to help with the lady's womb, you know? So it's more for females now, yeah?
Oh.
You see, so that's what that's for.
It's clear that the Indonesians and the Malaysians were travelling towards Africa, and they certainly populated Madagascar. And you had Africans coming presumably from across the East African side, the Swahili coast as it's called, and also populating. And today you've got this mix of populations in Madagascar. The Chinese circumnavigated Africa as well, and even parts of the American continent. You know, they weren't just sailing from here to Africa like that. They would stop at different places, they would trade at different places, they would interact with the local populations, so that the journey was long and slow.
In the year of 1405, with the permission of the emperor of the Chinese Ming Dynasty, Zheng He led a huge fleet of more than 240 ships and 27,400 crew members to set sail. They visited more than 30 countries and regions in the Western Pacific and Indian Ocean, and they have reached the east coast of Africa 4 times. Zheng He's ocean exploration was about 80 years before the expedition of the explorers Da Gama and Columbus. In 28 years, Zheng He made a total of 7 voyages, symbolizing a peak in the history of Chinese navigation.
We don't know if colonialism had not happened, where we would be right now. Maybe we would have been, I don't know, because we were still realizing our own evolution in you know, becoming sophisticated, becoming this complex society. And this is something that was happening elsewhere.
How many recorded shipwrecks are here, and what would have been the first encounter of the Europeans with the Khoi and the San people that were living there?
I think the Saldanha who came around in 3 had an altercation with the Khoi in Table Bay. So these contacts weren't always friendly, and had a lot to do with the arrogance of Europeans as well.
But what was the nature of the scrimmage? Was it related to territory, food, or?
Who knows? I mean, it might be that the Europeans were just arrogant in the way they approached the people and demanded too much. East Coast of Africa, 3 main trade items were ivory, gold, and slaves for a very long time.
Slavery in Africa begins with the Arabs. Then the Europeans come later with their colonial rule and so forth. The impact that slavery had on Africa is insane. It's insane because we left Africa as slaves and went into the entire world to go and build other civilizations and cities.
Unfortunately, slave ships, we've only identified one in South Africa. It's the record we're working on.
Can you tell us about that?
That's the record the soldiers had in 1794 on its way back from Mozambique slaves. It was on a voyage to Brazil for sugar plantations there. 500 slaves, 212 died, and then the rest were sold. When we announced the shipwreck project in 2015, we had our own cleansing ceremony on the beach.
What did you guys do? Amazing.
We brought back sand from Mozambique, from the area where the slaves came from. And then we had a Mozambique into the waves and scattered the sand. To save the spirits of the dead slaves that we had, the descendants had.
Africans have not recovered from the scars and the trauma of colonialism. I mean, it's evident in the way in which young people continue with the struggle against the effects of colonialism, with the projects to decolonize Africa and the diaspora scene in the Black Lives Matter movement, in the Peace Must Fall movement. So I really struggle to understand when some among us feel that we should be over colonialism.
In Ghana, some people joke and say, yeah, Kwame Nkrumah decided to marry an Egyptian because he knows that the Akans, which is one of our ethnic groups, they came from the Nile. They migrated south.
Yeah.
So he knows that there is a connection anyway.
He was smart.
She's not a stranger.
Yeah.
She was smart.